Hey folks, welcome to the Redbud virtual hike, the third episode. Today, we were supposed to be at Stevens Trail doing a wildflower hike and walking into the canyon there, but I determined that Stevens Trail is just a little bit too difficult to keep up proper social distancing. It's mostly a one-file trail, there's cliffs on either side, so it's not really easy to maintain your space. It's also really popular, so I was fearful that there'd be a lot of people out there. And so to make up for it, I decided to head out to a little known spot. I've actually never seen other people here. I don't know much about what technically this area is. It's a little range area where they graze cattle. I think it's a wildlife preserve, but I'm actually just over the Nevada County border into Yuba County. I'm at the intersection of Marysville Road and Loma Rica Road, and I'm walking along this flume here, and the flume is empty right now, but in other years this will be running well into the summer, and so you get really interesting plants along this edge here where there's water, and we're down closer to sea level, so things have been flowering here for a while, and I thought I'd come out and check out what's going on. I did want to point out that this area did recently burn a couple years back, 2 years I think, and so you can see the pine trees there. Those are gray pines, and they have their pine cones still remaining on the branches, and so I just wanted to point out that the gray pine is fire adapted, and so its cones have a resin that keep the scales shut, and when a fire moves through, it melts that resin and will open up the scales on the cone, and it will drop the seeds. So this whole area should come back. We have quite a bit of fire adapted species here, like the Ceanothus, the buckbrush. I don't know if you can make out right below that other pine, but there's a bunch of yerba and similar kinds of shrubs. Oh, over here these are interior live oaks that are sprouting. So here's the tree that was killed in the fire, and it's not dead. It's just resprouting from the roots there, because these are all fire adapted plants. So fire can come through and not really impact the plant life too much, other than set it back. I should point out, just because it's flowering over here, but we do have one of our non-natives, but this one's pretty popular amongst people because it does have really beautiful flowers. This is Scarlet Pimpernel, and so yeah, I don't know much about it other than it's a non-native plant. It's often found in gardens, but just on the edge right here, it's actually doing quite well. So, but yeah, we'll move on and talk about some of the native plants we see. I'll see you on down the trail. So here we have the beautiful blue tubular flowers of Eriodictyon californicum, or the California yerba santa. And oh, there's got a butterfly, swallowtail. And so yeah, yerba santa is adapted to fire, and it comes back in these big sprouts post-fire. You can kind of make that out. It is in the borage family, Boraginaceae. It sort of is easy to tell that it's in Boraginaceae, and sort of difficult to tell. A lot of plants in Boraginaceae have what's called scorpioid flowers, or they look like a scorpion's tail, like they're curled under. Think of like Phacelia, popcorn flowers, fiddlenecks, things like that. And this one only slightly has that habit, but certainly those tube-shaped flowers with the fused petals, it's very, very borage-like, very it's one of the things that the borage family is known for. And so yeah, these leaves are really beautiful on the underside. Look at that venation there. Look at those veins. And it is a plant with medicinal quality, so you can use it in a tea. I know people used it as bandages. You could take these sort of resinous leaves here and use them as a wound cover. I was told it's done better with the new growth rather than the old growth, and I'm sure there's a lot more uses that I am forgetting, but yeah, it's really just a spectacular plant. one of my favorites, and apparently the butterflies love it. So yeah, here is California yerba santa. Now, unfortunately, with this plant that is growing in this little pile of rocks, along with some poison oak, here you can check out the poison oak flowers for a second while I'm talking about this other plant. So I will not be able to get to species with this one. There's a few that it could possibly be. My initial thoughts are that this is certainly a solanum. So in the Solanaceae, that's your tomato family, that's potatoes, that's eggplant, and things like that. You can see those flowers do look a lot like tomato flowers, don't they? And with the blue color and the size of these flowers, my guess is that this is Solanum xanthi, which is Xanti, but I can't be sure of the actual species. Oh, here's the little fruits. There you go, little green, not quite ripe fruits. And so this guy right here is also related to poison nightshade. It's another solanum species. And so you definitely wouldn't want to be eating those berries anytime soon. This one might be poisonous. There's a couple that are edible too, and they sell in gardens. One I grow at home is called Wonderberry. It's a solanum species, and it has really delicious little black berries, but it looks exactly like the poison solanum. So you want to be sure, absolutely sure, and because I grew that one in my garden, I could be that you're dealing with an edible or a deadly poisonous species. So very serious there. But we do have some non-native solanums that have escaped cultivation and or are weedy, and so they would grow in an area like this. But we do have some natives too that look exactly like this, so it could be a native. Just I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, solanum. All right, so down in the flume we have a little plant which I believe is in the Plantaginaceae. That's the plantain family, and certainly this is in the genus Veronica. Another name for these are speedwells, and we have several natives and several non-natives. I don't know my Veronica species well enough to know what is the case with this one. It could very well be a native. One of the more common invasives I know about has much rounder, not as long leaves, and they're a lot more toothed. That one's the Persian speedwell. And that one is not this plant, so I'm not exactly sure which one this is, but Veronica really do have gorgeous flowers. So I just wanted to point that one out, and next time you see one of them, give it a little closer look. Now, as I had said, this area is pretty heavily impacted by non-natives, partially because of the grazing and partially because, this is not a natural watercourse. But using this non-native mullein here, I can show you a plant phenomena. So here's your normal flower stalk of the mullein. And then you have this guy. Quite fat and deformed. You can see it goes all the way down. The whole stem here is widened. So this is a plant phenomena known as fasciation. And fasciation can be caused by a number of reasons. It could be just there's a genetic abnormality, and so it grows as a fused stem where the growing point widens and flattens out and then continues to grow. It could also be caused by insect damage or bacteria or viruses. So I can't really tell you why this mullein is doing what it's doing, but it is something to notice. It does absolutely affect native plants as well. You can see native plants with fasciation. But yeah, it's a good thing to be aware of, so you know exactly what you're looking at when you go off hiking in the woods. And so here, check out that fasciation there. That's what we're talking, like 5 inches across or something, compared to normally, it's like an inch. And for whatever reason, it still produces flowers, and it seems like it is producing even more seeds than normal. So it might even be to the benefit with this specific species. So yeah, and just in case you didn't know, this is the great mullein. Verbascum, I think is the genus. Verbascum thapsus is the scientific name. So yeah, fasciation, fascinating. So here we have, you know, one of our more common and, you know, a lot of people's favorite flower, or among their favorite flowers. This is one of the monkey flowers. This is the seep monkey flower, and you can see it's growing in this little wet area, which leads down to the flume here. So this used to be known as Mimulus guttata, but now it is Erythranthe guttatus. They changed the name recently, and you know, it has to do, whether it's Erythranthe, man, that's a tongue twister, Erythranthe, or Diplacus is the other genus that Mimulus in California have been split into, has to do with the length of the pedicel. So that is this little stalk right here holding up a flower, that's called a pedicel, and then the floral tube, which is this little bit right here made of these are the sepals that are united. So if the pedicel is longer than the flower tube, like this one, you get Erythranthe, and if the pedicel is smaller than the floral tube, then you get Diplacus. And so that's how they split the monkey flowers out. But just look at those gorgeous little orange dots in there, and you got little hairs going on in the floral tube. Here are the leaves. It's got opposite leaves and mostly square stems, which means you can actually confuse this with something in the mint family. But there's no smell. And of course, once it's got flowers, those little bunny-eared looking flowers are pretty distinctive for the monkey flowers. So yeah, this is the seep monkey flower. So whenever I go hiking, I really get excited when I come across a little drainage, you know, somewhere where all the water is draining out, because you often will get interesting plant life happening. You know, it makes sense. Where there's more water, there's interesting plants. And this right here is one of my favorite water-associated plants. It is just starting to leaf out. Let me see if I can point out one of these. This is where the seeds, where the flowers were, where the seeds were born, this little like ball on the end of a twig. So this one is our Buttonwillow. This is actually a species that's, the species name is occidentale, implying that it's from the West Coast, but it is really found across the US in wet areas. It has beautiful white flowers that are like orbs. They're circular flowers with flowers coming out on all sides of the orb, with exerted floral parts. And it's just, the butterflies absolutely love this bush. Anytime I see them in flower, they're just coated in various kinds of butterflies. And believe it or not, this one is in Rubiaceae is the family. And Rubiaceae is known as the madder family, but its most famous member is coffee, like you probably had this morning for breakfast. So yeah, this plant is actually related to the coffee plant. And you know, if you have a water feature in your yard, I highly recommend trying to establish one of these guys in there. You can see it gets quite large, grows right on the edge of the where the drainage comes and meets the flume here. So it gets enough water. Oh, and there's the cows. See, I told you they do grazing here. But yeah, so buttonbush or buttonwillow, really awesome plant. So you never know what you're going to find if you are paying close attention and looking at the ground. This little plant right here is, that's as big as it's going to get. And it is aptly named Pygmy Weed. And so I believe the genus name is Crassula. And this one is actually in the same family as like our sedums and a lot of our succulent plants. But yeah, just grows very, very tiny and these sort of hard, compacted clay areas, and this is just on the path. So yeah, Pygmy weed. There are little flowers that grow in each of these little axils among each of these little leaves growing here, but I don't have my hand lens with me today, so I can't exactly show you, but keep your eyes real peeled, and maybe you will find pygmy weed and be treated with some of its little tiny, very, very tiny flowers. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to go over a little bit about the difference between the two most common oaks in these sort of oak grasslands that we have at the lower elevations. Well, at least the deciduous oaks that we have in these areas. So what we have here is a beautiful valley oak. And so if we look at the valley oak leaves, they are quite deeply lobed. But if you watched our video at Yoweum Bomb Trail and we talked about the black oak, which also has deeply lobed leaves, this one does not have any sharp points on the ends of each of those lobes. In fact, the lobes are very rounded. And so that, coupled with the elevation and of course the bark and, you know, kind of smaller, well, I should say smaller, shorter, but often much wider growth habit. And so contrast those really highly lobed leaves here with these oak leaves. So these ones are technically lobed, but they're hardly lobed. They're more like, I would consider that maybe toothed or something like that. And so this one is our blue oak. And so it grows a little bit smaller than the valley oak, but pretty much the same size. And this one is just a very tiny guy. And I'm only really choosing this one so I can show you the leaves up close. But yeah, so blue oak and our valley oak, because they tend to grow in lower elevations, these are actually the oaks that get the most amount of gall activity on them. So, you know, insects, there will be hundreds of species of insects which can utilize like a single valley oak right here. And if you're lucky and you look beneath the valley oak, and I think the time to do this is in about August, and I'm only going off of a rumor because I've actually never seen this yet. It's on my bucket list, but there you can look on the ground below a valley oak and you will see little tiny things bouncing all around. And maybe you've heard of Mexican jumping beans, because that's exactly what those are. Mexican jumping beans are actually little galls with little larvae inside, and the larvae will bounce around. And the reason is so that they can sort of find a way to wiggle down in the duff and, you know, bury themselves as below the leaves as far down as they could possibly go, so that they can pupate and release into the soil. And then the adult emerges from the soil, flies up to a valley oak, another valley oak, and lays its eggs in the leaves, and the cycle continues on again. So yeah, my mind was really blown when I learned that Mexican jumping beans are actually just an oak gall that occurs in California. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that one next time you're out in the summertime. So up on the ridgetop, I found an example of a black oak, which is the other deciduous oak we have, and I just quickly wanted to point out the sharp points on the tips of all of those lobes as compared to the rounded lobes on the valley oak. So even when they have leaves, that's how you can tell the two apart. This one's growing up on top of the ridgetop here. So for whatever reason, maybe a bird flew an acorn up here, it was able to get started. It typically grows at higher elevations, but here it is, so can't argue with that. So yeah, black oak, Quercus kilogii. So how about that view of the Sutter Buttes all the way over there? Just thought I would show off a little bit. But really, why I'm up here on these rocks is to point out another plant. And here we have caterpillar Phacelia. So this is another one in the borage family. And if you remember back to when I was talking about yerba santa, I mentioned scorpioid flowers. Well, this is the perfect example of the scorpioid flower. See how it curls over like a scorpion's tail? And then, yeah, so borage family then has its flowers emerge from that scorpioid-like tail. And I really like the caterpillar Phacelia because of the like dusky brown orange that's in the middle of the flower there. You can make that out. I think it looks really pretty. And you want to be careful when you're handling these because they can give certain sensitive people dermatitis, you know, which is like a skin irritation. You can see these little hairs that are growing on the flowers, and that's something that's really common in this family, is to have those little hairs. And like I said, they can be kind of needle-like and they can give you a little bit of skin irritation. But you can see it's just growing here in the crack of the rock. Pretty pretty indicative of the habitat type that caterpillar Phacelia really likes, in these rock cracks. At, I usually see it at like lower elevations. But yeah, I'm just hanging out here in the oak woodlands with all of these like tombstone-like boulders, which, all this area has been eroded, and as the soil was eroded out off of these hills, it left these big piles of rocks. Really interesting habitats, but I do have to be careful for rattlesnakes. Well, right here we have one of our native bulbs. This one is Heartleaf laxa. It is known as Wally Basket or ethereal spear. And one thing I want you to pay attention to while we're looking at this flower is, see the stamens in the flower? That's where the stamens are, where the pollen is born. It's those little stalks coming out there. I'm going to see if I can get this to come out in video, but I want you to notice how 3 of the 6 stamens on this plant are attached about ½ an inch down in the floral tube, and then every other one is attached right at the point where the petals kind of separate there. So you have 3 of the 6 that are attached lower, and 3 of the 6 that are attached higher. And so that's one of the identifying features of this plant. There is another one, Heartleaf bridgesii, the Bridges brodia, which has all of its stamens attached at the same level. So you do want to look quite closely at these guys to determine which of the 2 look-alike species you have. And it is growing in like a little patch over here. So, this is one of the geophytes, so it's a bulb, comes out of the ground, spends most of its time dormant. In the summertime anyway, it's dormant and avoiding the heat. And so yeah, you can see there's little patches of them all around over here. And then we have a little patch of the purple sanicle. If I can get it to focus. Purple sanicle. This is the purple form. And remember, I did talk about this species on a past video at the Olmsted Loop Trail, that this plant, though it's known as the purple sanicle, and it does have a purple form, also has a yellow form, which looks like some of the other sanicles. So what you want to look at are these leaves down here, and you can see these leaves are very distinctive of the purple sanicle. They have the really wide, leafy midrib right there that I'm touching. None of the other sanicles will have that, and certainly if it's purple, you can be pretty sure you know what you got there. So yeah, purple sanicle growing along some Wally baskets, and look, there's even a little lupin. And lupins are really tough to ID. There's a couple that are really distinctive, but this is not one of those. It could be the dwarf lupin, or it could be just one of the bigger lupins, which is just only starting to get going, flowering. So beyond saying that it is a lupinous species, I can't tell you what kind of lupin it is. But nice little wildflower patch here. Lupins and Wally baskets and the purple sanicle. Oh, and then there's even one more, which I did talk about in a previous video, so I won't spend a lot of time talking about. But we do have some popcorn flowers. Looking like popcorn in the field. So again, these ones, oh, that's really interesting. They have like a black coloration around all the sepals before the flowers have opened. So yeah, popcorn flowers, you need seeds to identify. I'm not gonna spend the time right now looking through trying to find a seed to figure out what species it is. And there's the chance that even if I did find seeds, that I would not be able to identify it anyway. So it's pretty advanced to try to get your popcorn flowers down to species. But yeah, that's a Plagiobothris. There's also Cryptantha. Those are also popcorn flowers, but they're different genuses, very closely related in the same family. So I'm laying here in the grass to bring you up close and personal to a very tiny flower. See, there's my finger for scale. And so I did speak earlier in the video about a plant that grows in watery areas called Buttonwillow, and that it is related to coffee. Well, so is this little guy. This is another little plant in the Rubiaceae. This one is called the field madder. Madder, M-A-D-D-E-R. I believe it's Sherrardia is the genus. And yes, you can find them in these little grasslands. They grow very, very tiny, kind of below the other flowers. And see those little four-petaled pointed flowers? That's one of the things that points to the Rubiaceae. So yeah, field madder, little belly plant. All right, well, I headed over the next ridge and I found a perfect example of what I was talking about as far as the sanicles go. So this right here, with the yellow flower, has the same leaves with that thick, leafy mid-vein as the purple sanicle. So this one is the purple sanicle. You know, if I just move over just a little bit, there it is. There's the purple form. So the purple form and the yellow form can even grow right next to each other. However, we do have this plant right here, which has smaller yellow flowers. And if you look at the leaves, which there are hardly any leaves left, but right there next to my finger, they are really pinnate. They're really pointed, and the midrib that they have is very thin. It's not leafy at all. And so this one is actually the poison sanicle. So purple sanicle, a little bit bigger, and has that midrib, and then poison sanicle. And so poison sanicle is Sanicula bipinnata, and purple sanicle is Sanicula bipinnatifida. So they even have very similar scientific names. But yeah, they are two different species. Two of our sanicle species. Here's the two, yellow form and the poison sanicle, growing directly next to each other. So yeah, easily confused, but also easily identified with just a little bit of closer inspection. Got another wildflower for you here. You'll notice these purple blooms. We have opposite leaves that are kind of heart-shaped, right? See the how they clasp the stem? They look, oh, if I can get the shadow out of there. So they look heart-shaped. This is called Heartleaf Milkweed, or purple milkweed. It's Asclepias cordifolia, one of our native milkweeds. It will come out of the same spot every year, put out its flowers, and then die back below the ground during the hot part of the year. And one thing to note is with milkweeds, they have evolved a tactic, well, relatively unique tactic for pollination. They produce what's called a pollinia, which is an accumulated sac of pollen, rather than, you know, the little individual specks of pollen like most other plants will have. And when the flowers are open, and I wish some of these flowers are open so I could show you, but they have a shape so that the flower has a little crook in it, where a pollinator insect like a bee will come over and actually get its legs stuck in that little crook. And so then it thrashes around and it struggles, and it manages to get one of the pollinia, one of those pollen sacs, attached to its back in the perfect spot. And then eventually it will be able to free itself and it'll fly off to another milkweed, and it will repeat the same process, this time depositing the pollinia. I guess they don't learn their lesson. They just keep doing it. And so yeah, the only other family that has evolved the same thing are the orchids in the orchid family, and they also produce a pollinia, but they don't trap the insects. They entice the insects and basically induce a little trigger, which then comes down and like attaches the pollinia to the back of the insect. This one actually traps the insect, and you know, if they're small enough or if they're weak enough, they might actually get trapped in there for good. They might just die. So that's not the best thing for the plant, because it doesn't get pollinated, nor the insect because it died. Another thing to note is that oftentimes milkweeds attract lots of predator insects like crab spiders and praying mantises, because when the insect is stuck in that little crook, they make for an easy meal. So that's why they're considered really good ecosystem plants, really good habitat plants, you know, let alone the milkweed, let alone the monarch butterflies which visit them. And there's plenty of other butterflies that also visit milkweeds. So that's why we love milkweeds. Asclepias cordifolia, heartleaf milkweed, or purple milkweed. Well, this is one I wasn't expecting to find, so this is a real treat. This is one of the Lithophragma species. It's commonly known as a woodland star. Many of them have these really ornate petals like that are really divided. And they produce a flower spike, which has flowers alternating up the spike, and then those are the newest flowers. It does have very different cauline leaves, and remember, cauline leaves are leaves that exist up the stem, and then basal leaves, which are leaves that exist at the bottom of the plant where it meets the ground. And so, you know, this guy's maybe 2 feet tall or so, poking out of this little rocky area. And this is another genus that I don't really know my species, so I won't be able to tell you what species, but they are really gorgeous plants. This woodland star, one of the Lithophragmas. So here we have a plant we've already talked about on a previous video. This is the true baby stars. It's a Leptis Bicolor. But walking through this little patch over here, I noticed every once in a while there's a white form. So typical rosy form, white form. Another white one, another purple one. And so for all intents and purposes, I mean, it does look to be exactly the same otherwise. It just lacks that red pigment. So as far as I know, this is just a color morph of the same species, Leptis Bicolor, the true baby stars. But I can't be 100% sure. So if anyone knows any better, please correct me. But certainly, if it were the same species, which I'm pretty sure it is, this is one reason why you don't want to go by flower color to identify stuff, because there can be color morphs where it's the same species, but it just has a slightly different color. It's very cool. I've never seen a white version before. And while I got you down here, I might as well point out this kind of look-alike right here. See that flower? And it has divided petals. It's the same rosy color, but it doesn't have rounded petals. It has like the divided petals there, and that's actually the flower. Well, that will eventually become this seed right here. This is the stork's bill, the crane's bill, fillory, one of the erodium species. So here, I'll show you that flower one more time, and then to compare it, that's the baby stars. Almost the same size, a little bit different on the petals there. That's pretty much the only difference between their flowers. All right, so we have another really nasty invasive, and maybe one that you can do your part to help us remove. This one is called Italian Thistle. So get a good look at that flower there. You can see that's about how big it is. And you'll notice that a lot of these leaves sort of have a white mottling on it, but they are not as wide as the milk thistle, which is another invasive thistle, which looks a lot like this. Also, the flowers are quite different. So with the Italian thistle, they are real tiny like that. And the milk thistle has, you know, large palm-sized flowers with big old bracts, and not these little dinky bracts in there. But in any case, these plants are edible. And I don't know if you can see, but you probably don't want to just bite right into there. But if you were to take this stalk and you were to cut it and peel it, you could eat it like celery. And as well as these flower heads, when they are unopened yet, although Italian thistle is probably not one of the best ones to do this with. Milk thistle is way better, but you can eat them, roast them, and eat them like an artichoke. They are very closely related to artichokes, in fact. So yeah, this, check out the, like, the wings of thorns on the stalk there. And, you know, a lot of plants are spiny like this so that they don't get eaten by deer, or, you know, in this case, by cows. And this one had plenty of water with a stream right here, and had this nice rock to warm up temperatures, and then quickly bolted, and oh, it's about 3.5 feet tall or so. So yeah, that's your Italian thistle. Here we have a beautiful little flower, which, although it kind of looks purple in this video, is actually called Redmade's. This is related to miner's lettuce, believe it or not. It's in that same family. These ones are very happy and large. There is a beautiful, beautiful patch of them covering this little berm. And yeah, Britmates. The Native Americans used to eat these guys. I don't know, they don't seem like they're very substantial, but you know, maybe they taste good or something. I'm not going to eat it. Eat the weeds, not the natives. There, I said it. So anyway, yeah, Redmates. All right, folks. Well, I think that is all for today. I really want to thank everyone who's been tuning in and watching these. You know, I really hope that pretty soon we'll be able to do some actual field trips and this whole thing will be behind us. But for the time being, enjoy the view of the Sutter Buttes in the background with the lupins, spider lupins, here in the foreground. Thanks for watching, everyone.